Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome on behalf of Edureka. I am Ankit Jain. I have a PhD from IIT Bombay. This is the topic for today's webinar. The agenda for today's class will be: we'll start by understanding what is DevOps. We'll understand the different stages of DevOps. What is release management? We will understand that what is a release management and what is a relationship between DevOps and release management. Later, we'll try to understand the typical 10 steps or process components of a release management and strategies of release management. At the end, we'll discuss about benefits of release management, and then we'll understand which are the management tools available for us to use. So let us understand what is DevOps with a whiteboard. Now, typically, when a software is developed, what are the three stages or what are the different teams working on a software? Those who are from software background may like to answer that. If you're developing a software, who are the major team members or major groups in the software development? If I can say, there are major three teams. One, the developer team, right, which develops the software. The coding is done in this team, right? Second is the operation team, which deploys the software, right, which takes care, which checks the software, deploys the top software, etc. And third, generally, the testing team. In many companies, they call it quality analyst team, right? It will test the software. Now, do you think a developer team, a single member works on it? In a software, does a single member work on the software, or there are multiple team members within the developer team also? Multiple, right? So within the developers also, there are multiple teams working on different pieces, right? Some may be working on some piece of the software, some may be working on GUI of the software, etc. Right? Similarly, operations team may have different members, right? Let us now concentrate up, assuming that this team is also a part of operation team. Okay, between this team, what is the most necessary thing? There are two ways to work. I don't know, many of you may have worked. There are two management systems. One is known as waterfall system and the other is known as agile system. Okay, now in waterfall system, what happens? First, the developer team will finish their work. Okay, then only a quality or the operations team will start their work. Correct? Those who are clear with this waterfall system management system, please raise your hand. That first developer team will complete their work and then operations team will start their work. Okay, but this is not the efficient way right now. The companies are moving toward more agile system. Okay, in which what happens, the developer teams and the operations team, they work together during software development. Okay, in this system, what will happen? A constant collaboration is required. Collaboration is required, and also constant changes are taking place. Correct? So how do we manage them? Right? When I say constant changes, it means that today, suppose a developer team, one member of the developer team has worked on a small piece of software and has pushed it to the main code. Right? Now, the operations team also should get that notification in real time that there have been some changes in the main code, right? And everything should be automated in that case. So basically, DevOps is a framework which uses various tools to solve the problems between operations, between developers and operations. Okay, and that is why we have the word, DevOps. Okay, now you may ask, what are the problems? One of the major problem is, one, developers are working on, say, Linux, or say have developed the code or the software on Python 3.6, right? But the operations team, they are working on Windows machine and they are using Python, say 3.8. Okay, now what will happen, that the developer team has developed something, but the operations team are not able to run that because the environment is not same, right? So what will be there? There will be a fight between them, that you have not, operations team will tell the developers team, you have not worked hard on your code, it's not running. And developer team will say, you don't know anything about coding, you are not even able to run the software, right? So a lot of problems will be there. Other than that, version issues will be there, right? Suppose they are able to run also, but the developer team has just entered a new version of the code, but that code is not available or is not live with operations. So there are a lot of version issues. So there will be a lot of email sharing, that which code you have sent, which code have you used, what are the issues, we have already, debugged it, etc., etc. So these kind of problems will occur between operations and the developers team. Okay, now, is DevOps a tool? Also, a lot of people are confused. Nowadays, there are DevOps group being formed. But is DevOps, when anyone says DevOps, does that mean that there is a group or team in your company which is DevOps? The answer is no. Okay. DevOps is the process. DevOps is a process, or we can say methodology, to develop software. Okay, and in order to do that methodology, you will require a lot of tools. Okay, so there is a lot of demand for people. Let me write this properly so that all of you can take it away. There is lot of demand for engineers who have thorough DevOps understanding. Okay, and more importantly, they should also know about the tools required for DevOps. Okay, so if you know the tools about DevOps, etc., if they know about the tools about DevOps which is required to do DevOps, there is a lot of demand for such engineers in the company now. Why? Because they want to follow this methodology in order to develop their software. Okay, perfect. With this background, DevOps is a methodology that brings the developer and operations team together. So you can see the developer team will do what? It will code, it will build, and it will test. Okay, now once the code is built, right, and it is tested, it needs to be released. The release is taken care by operations team. Once it is released, then it will be deployed and it will be monitored. Okay, and suppose during the monitoring step we find out there are bugs in the code, or there are more changes required as per the client's request, we can release it again, and the DevOps team will work on that code and then build it again. So this cycle will keep on continuing. Okay, so this cycle is what we call the DevOps framework. So today we will be talking about what is the release management system in DevOps. Okay, in this cycle, what is the release management system? That is the specific topic for today's discussion. So DevOps integrates all the functions as I had explained earlier, dev, developers team, operations team, and QA into a single entity that delivers value. So all of them together will be joined by a common part of them is the DevOps group. Now, what is release management? It is a process of managing, planning, and scheduling and controlling a software build through different stages and environments, which include testing and deploying software releases. This is the definition of that. Okay, so if you see here, there is a release step. This release step is most important. It gets deployed. Now, what is the mechanism to have a release system or managed in a DevOps environment? That is what we are going to discuss. How do we control this? What are the tools required to control this? All this shall be discussed in our section today. What is DevOps release management? So release management in DevOps is about planning, scheduling, and controlling the software development and delivery process. IT operations and developers collaborate from the beginning of the process to the end in DevOps for shorter and fewer feedback loops and faster releases. If you see here, which is the most critical step according to you all? The main or critical fast development for software is, all the steps are equally important, but the main steps will be the one in which there is interaction between the two teams, that is developers team and operations team. If you see, these are the two main steps. One is the step where the software needs to be released from the developers team, and the feedback needs to come back to the developers team feedback, so that they can restart the coding, they can remove the debugging bugs, etc. So these two are critical steps in any DevOps environment. Okay, so that is why we need to have a proper management system, so that the interaction between the developers and the operations team are quick. So in short, the developership team should get the feedback from the operations team fast, and based on that, the developers team should be able to work fast on the code and get it released for the operations team to deploy. Correct? So these two are the major steps or critical steps for a very good software development cycle. So as I said, for shorter and fewer feedback loops and faster release, the operations and the developers team should collaborate. So that is the critical step. Now that steps are managed by a release management system. So what is a release management system? It consists of 10 major components. Okay, the process consists of 10 major components. One is release pipeline, release pipeline, release value stream, release policy, release template, release plan. Okay, correspondingly we have development deployment plan, the release unit, the release package, the major releases, and the minor releases. So all these process components are to be understood in order to have a release management system. Okay, now what is the release pipeline? The release pipeline is basically the pipeline wherein the developer writes the code and deploys it. Okay, so how that whole cycle of pipeline is known as the release pipeline. The release process that adds or create value across the release pipeline, so that is known as release value stream. The release policy, it consists of definitions of release types, standards, and governance required for an organization. So what do you mean by this? So in industry, if any release is given, there has to be a policy for it, right? What kind of release is this? What standards of release are you maintaining? What is the governance requirement for an organization? So all these need to be understood by a DevOps techno engineer in order to have a release policy. Release template. The release template is a single or repeatable workflow process for release pipeline, which includes human and automated activities. Okay, so here, when if you look at this figure again, you will observe that many steps in this can be either automated or can be made manual. For example, once a code is built, right, should the testing happen automatically? If the testing is done, should we release it by manual intervention or automatic intervention? All this is also part of your policy and your vision for your software development. So that is what it is saying here, that your release template is either a single or repeatable workflow for release pipeline, which includes human and automated activities. So I hope all of you are understanding that once your software is developed, is built, and then it is released after testing, that release, is it happening manually or humanly? That we need to look into. What is the plan for your release? Okay, there has to be a plan when and how the release needs to be done. So many companies will follow the system of, can we release it as soon as we code it, or do we have to have various steps, various say 3-step layer between the DevOps development and the operations team? So all this is a plan which we need to make. Similarly, a deployment plan is there. So what does this mean? In more intuitive way, I can explain it this way. Suppose you are in the developers, in your developer, you are a developer and I am the operations team. Okay, the main work of operations team is to deploy the model. Okay, so suppose it is deployed and it goes live on the website. So suppose you make any changes, it will be shown on your website. Suppose this is the activity going on. Now there are two things here. One, this deployment, it can be manual, it can be automated, and it has to have some policy that, suppose a new developer team has developed a new code, has made some changes, right? Now that changes comes to operations team. What will be the steps for this operation team before it gets it deployed? That is one step. Similarly, can we commit directly? That also is a part of a plan, okay, or a template, that once a developer develops something, what is the process for it to get operationalized? That is another question. So that is what it is saying. It is a release plan related to interaction between the DevOps team and the operations team, while deployment is a relationship between the the operations team and the product going live, the deployment going live on the production server. That is what is the deployment plan. Okay. Similarly, you have release units, you have release packages. The set of artifacts released together to implement a specific feature, that is known as release unit, while package is a combination of release units deployed together as a single release due to interdependencies, scheduling, or business priorities. So what does this mean? It means that, suppose you are the developer and you have made 3 changes, right? Now this is the developers team and this is the operation team. Now this 3 changes, what is the methodology? Do we release this 3 changes one by one, 1, 2, 3 in 3 steps? Then each step is known as release units. What is it known as? Release units. But if all three are pushed together by the developers team and operation team gets it released all together, then this all three together is known as a package. Okay, so these are different terms, release units or release packet. So that is what it is saying here, that one is a release unit and the other is a release package. Next, now even the release have two types. What are the two types? The release can be either major or it can be minor. You may understand that when you make a new release or when a new package is released, whether it is a substantial change in your website or whether it is a small change in your website, that is known as major and minor. Okay, infrequent releases are basically major. That is, once in a time you make an entire change in your structure of codes, that is known as a major release. If you make small changes in your code which keeps on, like suppose every day you keep on adding new components, you remove new component from your website, okay, that is known as minor release. But suppose you change the entire website or you make a entire change in some part of the websites, entire website, some part are changed, then it is known as a major release. Now, what are the strategies of release management? So there are basically four strategies. One is release windows, that is slow on cadence. Then there are release trains. Then there are release windows that are quick in cadence. And then there are continuous release availability. So there are four ways by which the releases are managed. Okay, these are known as strategies of release management. So now let us understand these four types. What do you understand by release windows? Slow cadence. It means what? A release window is period of time in which one or more teams release into production. Okay. So if there is a release and one or more teams are working on that, then that is known as release windows. Similarly, there is a release train. The idea with the release train is that every team involved with that train has the same release cadence. This strategy is used in large programs or teams. So what does this mean? Let us try to understand intuitively. It means that suppose there are three developer teams. Okay, there are three developer teams and there is one operations team. Okay, either the developers can individually send their release, okay, and it will deploy it. This is known as release windows. If this is the kind of release you're following, it is known as release windows. Okay, but if there is a rule that all three will release their changes and on once all the deployment will take place, it is known as release train. Okay, so in industry mostly they follow this, that we will give you a time period, it is known as sprint also, that let us have sprints of 2 weeks. After 2 weeks whatever you have made changes, we will deploy it. Then you have release windows and continuous release availability. The quick cadence release are less likely to suffer from the bottleneck challenges associated with slow cadence release windows and release trains. Similarly, you have continuous release availability. With this approach, delivery teams are allowed to release their solutions into production whenever they need to. So unlike the previous where we had fixed windows, here it is a continuous release availability that anyone can release at any point of time. That is known as quick cadence release availability. Now, what are the benefits of this release management? The benefits are: one, we accelerate the time to value. Two, higher release throughput. Third, enhance agility and flexibility. What do you mean by this? Many a times when you start making the software, while you are making the software, a lot of changes are required. All those changes can be taken into consideration with enhanced agility and flexibility because of release management. Okay. It also leads to increased productivity. It eliminates duplicate and manual intensive activities. All the duplication of work is stopped. manual intervention, if we make it fully automated, manual interventions are stopped, and at the end it mitigates the release failure, right? Once you have a well made oil DevOps system, the release failures are also reduced increasingly. Okay, so these are the six major advantages why the release management systems are being employed in industry. Now, what are the tools for us to work on in order to manage this release management tools? The main tools are Zebia Labs release. You have Octopus deploy, TaskTop, Chef, Jenkins, Launch Darkly, Urban Code, Salt Stack, Clarif. These are the 9 industry standard used in, some are open source, some are paid software. Jenkins, for example, is widely used in industry for release management. Okay. Now Jenkins is totally open source. It means what? Anyone can buy and deploy it. Anyone can download Jenkins and uh, use it for their release management. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. All the best to all of you. Thank you so much.